It's 1876. The United States dispatches its renowned officer, George Custer, to quell Sitting Bull's defiance in Montana. As the general crests a ridge, he observes far more encampments than anticipated. Undaunted, Custer grins, lifts his hat, and shouts, "Hurrah, lads! We've got them!" Unbeknownst to him, he's approaching one of the largest Native American war camps ever gathered, with no reinforcements en route. Within hours, his entire immediate command is wiped out. Custer's name becomes linked not to triumph, but to one of the most devastating disasters in American military history. How did things go so catastrophically wrong? This is the tale of Custer's last stand. George Custer, born to an Ohio farmer, was a fiercely ambitious individual driven by a desire for fame and historical recognition. As a youth, he was clever, daring, and prideful. Entering West Point in 1857, he amassed 726 demerits for misconduct, one of the highest counts among cadets then. Yet his instructors and peers recognized the troublemaker's potential as an exceptional soldier. The Civil War provided Custer the stage to prove it. A brilliant officer, he secured numerous victories, always leading from the front. Known for charging into peril where others hesitated, he never demanded of his men what he wouldn't do himself. His troops revered him, and his superiors, impressed, made him one of the youngest brevet generals in U.S. history at 23. The press nicknamed him the Boy General. Soon, all knew of the gallant General Custer, with his bold style and distinctive long golden hair. On July 3, 1863, Custer and his troops were pivotal in securing the Union line at Gettysburg. Riding at the forefront in full officer's attire, he charged Confederate forces at a critical juncture, helping turn the battle's tide for the Union. His distinguished service persisted until the war's end. The table on which Robert E. Lee signed his surrender at Appomattox was later presented to Custer's wife, Elizabeth, with a note declaring that no one had contributed more to the surrender than her husband. Post-war, Custer was tasked with leading the 7th Cavalry against the Plains Indians. He resented the posting, viewing it as lacking in opportunities for glory. It wasn't until 1868 that he found a chance to reclaim the spotlight. As the U.S. pushed westward, it targeted the Black Hills, sacred to the Sioux. In April 1868, the Sioux and the U.S. signed the Fort Laramie Treaty, granting the Sioux rights to the Black Hills if they halted attacks on settlers and stayed on designated reservations. However, the U.S. had little intention of fully honoring the agreement. The Black Hills were too valuable, and the government expected settler influxes to provoke Sioux violations. Unaware of this duplicity, most Sioux accepted the terms. Chief Sitting Bull, a Lakota leader, did not. He rejected the treaty, believing the U.S. would inevitably encroach on their lands and that resistance was the only way to preserve their way of life. Sitting Bull was Custer's opposite. While Custer was brash and impulsive, Sitting Bull was composed and thoughtful. His name reflected his tendency to deliberate before acting. A war leader and spiritual figure, he claimed visions from the Great Spirit guiding his resistance against the Americans. He united many Lakota along with Cheyenne and other smaller groups to his cause. Working closely with his ally, a Lakota named Gall, Sitting Bull formed a coalition of nomadic warriors to counter American expansion, launching raids on U.S. settlements and rival tribes like the Crow and the Riccara after the Fort Laramie Treaty. The U.S. needed a courageous and skilled leader to stop Sitting Bull. They selected George Custer. In November 1868, Custer led the 7th Cavalry to attack a Cheyenne camp in Oklahoma. At dawn on November 27th, he charged through the camp along the Washita River, striking without warning. The assault killed 103 Cheyenne, including warriors, women, and children. Custer's deputy, Major Joel Elliott, took 20 men to chase fleeing Cheyenne while Custer completed operations in the camp. Custer saw the attack as a triumphant success. However, his ambition led to critical mistakes. First, the village belonged to Black Kettle, a Cheyenne chief seeking peace with the U.S., rendering future negotiations nearly impossible. Second, it was one of several villages along the river, and word spread quickly, forcing Custer's rapid withdrawal. Third, Elliott and his men were surrounded and killed by Cheyenne from nearby villages. Custer, unaware of their fate until later, did not wait for them. Many in the 7th Cavalry blamed Custer for Elliott's death. Captain Frederick Benteen, the most vocal critic, wrote a letter condemning Custer, which leaked to the press, enraging him. Though Benteen remained under his command, their mutual animosity endured. The Washita victory restored Custer's fame, rebranding him as a hero of the American West. Over the next few years, he led the 7th Cavalry against Native American groups. In 1873, they were permanently based at Fort Abraham Lincoln in Dakota Territory, better positioned to counter Sitting Bull's resistance. Two key figures join Custer's story here. Major Marcus Reno became a key officer. Reno, a volatile man with a severe drinking problem, found Custer arrogant and insufferable, as did Benteen. Fortunately, Custer surrounded himself with loyal allies to counter such critics. His brothers Tom and Boston and his brother-in-law, Lieutenant James Calhoun, joined him. Even his wife, Elizabeth, moved to Fort Abraham Lincoln to be near him. Custer's allies extended beyond white Americans. In 1873, a half-Sioux, half-Orator, a scout named Bloody Knife, joined his unit, becoming a close friend. Not all Native Americans backed Sitting Bull. Bloody Knife harbored a personal grudge against him, having been mistreated by Sitting Bull and Gall in the past. As a child, Gall had bullied him, and this feud turned tragic when Gall later killed Bloody Knife's brothers and son in separate raids. Bloody Knife nearly killed Gall in a confrontation, deepening their rivalry. Custer was the obvious choice to lead an 1874 expedition into the Black Hills. Officially, the mission was to find a fort site to counter Sitting Bull's resistance. In truth, it aimed to confirm gold deposits and spark a settler influx. The expedition was more a publicity stunt than a military operation. Facing no significant opposition, Custer spent more time hunting with his brothers and Bloody Knife than fighting. Photographers and journalists accompanying the expedition published tales and images of Custer's thrilling frontier exploits and the gold discovery. The expedition triggered a gold rush, with roughly 15,000 settlers flooding the Black Hills by late 1875. Officially, as these were independent settlers, the U.S. claimed it wasn't breaching the Fort Laramie Treaty. Unofficially, President Ulysses S. Grant endorsed the influx and awaited a Sioux reaction to justify seizing the Black Hills outright. In September 1875, Washington made a final attempt to negotiate with the Sioux to buy the Black Hills. Sitting Bull's warnings about American encroachment proved true, and the Sioux rejected the offer. In response, President Grant issued an ultimatum: any Lakota or Cheyenne not on U.S. reservations by January 31, 1876 would be deemed hostile. Issued in November 1875 during a harsh winter, this demand was nearly impossible, designed to provoke the Sioux and Cheyenne. The expedition to pursue Sitting Bull and his hostile forces left Fort Abraham Lincoln on May 17, 1876. General Alfred Terry, a Custer ally, held ultimate command. Scouts reported Sitting Bull's followers along the Yellowstone River, near where the Powder, Tongue, Rosebud, and Little Bighorn tributaries converged. Terry and Custer would lead the main force westward along the Yellowstone from Dakota Territory. Colonel John Gibbon's force would approach from Montana in the west, while General George Crooks would advance from Wyoming in the south, aiming to trap the Native Americans between the armies. Custer treated the expedition as another adventure, often veering off to hunt or explore, frustrating Terry. His brothers Major Reno and Captain Benteen shared the irritation. Reno was relieved when Terry sent him to scout the Rosebud River, where he found Sitting Bull's trail. Returning with the news, Reno faced Custer's criticism for not pursuing it aggressively. There was no time for further dispute. Terry split his forces again. He would join Gibbon's Montana troops, approaching down the Bighorn River from the north. Custer would head south, following the trail across the Rosebud. If Custer found Sitting Bull, he was to swing south and wait for Terry and Gibbon. Given Custer's reputation, expecting him to wait was unrealistic. "Custer, don't be greedy. Leave some for us," they said. "No," he replied, "I will not." The Americans were right about Sitting Bull's location. After Grant's ultimatum, Sitting Bull rallied thousands more warriors, knowing the Americans were coming. Numbers were their only hope for survival. Failure could mean their last summer as free nomads. His message drew about 8,000 people, including 2,000 to 3,000 warriors. Gall remained his closest advisor, joined by new leaders like Crazy Horse, a young, fearless Oglala Lakota warrior. Like Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse claimed visions, granting him great power. On June 17, 1876, Crazy Horse met Crook's Wyoming forces along the Rosebud River. With 1,500 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, he launched a daring attack against Crook's similarly sized army. Typically, Native American forces needed numerical superiority for open battles, but Crazy Horse's multi-directional tactics kept the Americans off balance. Only Crook's Crow and Shoshone's scouts enabled his retreat after losing 30 men. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull scored a stunning victory. Crook, shaken, reported the battle to his superiors but failed to inform Custer or Terry. With American forces closing in, Sitting Bull relocated his people to a new campsite in the valley of the Greasy Grass along the Little Bighorn River. There, they held the Sun Dance, during which Sitting Bull reportedly envisioned American soldiers falling into their camp, a sign of imminent victory. Meanwhile, Custer's men tracked Sitting Bull's trail over the Rosebud and toward the Little Bighorn. Unaware of Crook's defeat, Bloody Knife and other scouts noted the trail indicated a far larger Native American force, possibly thousands. Bloody Knife urged Custer to wait for Terry and Gibbon, warning the numbers might be overwhelming. Just after dawn on June 25, 1876, Custer's scouts climbed hills east of the Little Bighorn, spotting smoke from Sitting Bull's camp. For Custer, this was his moment of glory. Custer had 647 men in 12 companies. One stayed to guard supplies while the rest prepared for battle. Custer took 5 companies to attack from the north. Major Reno took 3 to strike from the south with Bloody Knife scouting, and Captain Benteen took 3 to swing south around Reno to join the battle on the camp's western flank. Custer relied on Reno and Benteen despite distrusting them, but had his loyal brothers Tom and Boston and brother-in-law Lieutenant Calhoun with him. Custer moved north, staying concealed behind hills until the last moment. Around 3 p.m., he reached a ridgeline overlooking the camp, seeing thousands of tents spanning over 3 miles, far more than expected. He quickly wrote orders. Benteen, come on. Big village, but be quick. Bring packs. A rider was sent to Benteen. Unwilling to wait, Custer waved his hat and shouted, "Hurrah, lads! We've got them," before charging down. To the south, Reno's 150 men crossed the Little Bighorn and approached the camp. Bloody Knife and the scouts met Lakota and Cheyenne warriors on the outskirts, alerting the camp. Sitting Bull and Gall in the southern part faced Reno's assault first. Reno, meeting resistance, ordered his men to dismount and form a skirmish line. Bullets hit the camp, striking warriors, women, and children. Sitting Bull initially sought to protect his people, sending his nephew and another warrior to negotiate. Both were killed. When an American bullet killed Sitting Bull's horse, he declared, "They have shot my favorite horse. It is like they have shot me. Attack them." Gall and Crazy Horse led a counterattack, overwhelming Reno's unprepared forces. Survivors later claimed Reno's drinking impaired his judgment. As Reno and Bloody Knife planned, a bullet killed Bloody Knife instantly, splattering Reno with blood and brain matter. Shaken, Reno ordered a retreat. "Any of you who wish to escape, follow me." Discipline collapsed as his men fled across the river, abandoning horses and weapons while scrambling up steep banks. Native warriors fired from the opposite side, cutting down many. To the southeast, Benteen heard the chaos and returned. On a hilltop, Reno and survivors scrambled up, pleading, "For God's sake, Benteen, hold your command and help me. I've lost half my men." Benteen asked, "Where is Custer?" Reno had no answer. Recalling past grievances, Benteen muttered, "It's another Custer affair," believing Custer had abandoned them for glory as with Elliott. Gunfire from Custer's direction suggested otherwise. Benteen received Custer's order to join, but stayed with Reno. For 2 hours they held Reno Hill until Custer's gunfire faded. One of Benteen's captains, frustrated, investigated and found the aftermath. The precise details of Custer's last stand are unclear, but this is the best reconstruction. Custer gathered his men on a hill, later called Calhoun Hill, to assess and await Benteen. He likely planned to take hostages to force surrender, as he had before, by crossing into the camp. Leading from the front, Custer's advance initially terrified the camp, with Sitting Bull later admitting, "We thought we were whipped." However, hidden Cheyenne and Lakota warriors fired from across the river. Crazy Horse and others breaking off from Reno rushed to confront Custer. Underestimating their numbers, Custer's forces retreated up the hill. Lieutenant Calhoun's company secured Calhoun Hill, while Custer, his brothers, and most men fell back to Last Stand Hill. Half of Calhoun's men died before reaching their position. Crazy Horse's mounted force encircled the Americans, while the main native force pursued up the slopes. Calhoun's position was overrun, with all killed. Realizing Benteen wasn't coming, Custer faced thousands of warriors overwhelming his 200 men. A storm of arrows and bullets engulfed them, with some native warriors accidentally killing each other in the chaos. Sitting Bull later said his warriors described Custer standing like a sheaf of horn with all the ears fallen around it. This was likely Custer's final moment. As Custer's gunfire ceased, Benteen and Reno, with about 400 men, were surrounded on Reno Hill. They held off attacks through the night of June 25th. On June 26th, as scouts sighted Terry and Gibbon approaching, Sitting Bull withdrew his people. Terry arrived asking, "Where's Custer?" The bodies of 210 men from 5 companies were found, some scalped or mutilated. Benteen, inspecting a body with 2 bullet wounds, one in the chest, one in the head, said, "My God, it's him," confirming Custer's death. On July 6, 1876, news of Custer's defeat reached Fort Abraham Lincoln. Days later, the Little Bighorn disaster was national news. Just before, on July 4, 1876, America had celebrated its centennial, filled with pride in heroes like Custer, seen as subduing savage Indians. His death shocked many Americans who saw themselves as an unstoppable force of progress. Some blamed Custer's recklessness, saying his quest for glory undid him. Others criticized Benteen and Reno for ignoring Custer's orders. Few acknowledged the skill and resolve of Sitting Bull, Gall, and Crazy Horse, who defeated one of America's finest commanders in open battle. Sitting Bull's coalition had proven its strength and braced for the U.S.'s next move.